Okay, thank you for coming. This is on the holiday. There's full crowd here, so please bear with me. And the microphone is broken, so it doesn't work. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm gonna make it short because we got blue sheets at the table about donations. Please kind of take care of that. We are taking care of all the donations. So we are. Do we have pledge of allegiance?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
National anthem?
Yes, please.
And then we'll have the Israeli one.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Start it.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed by the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Now we'll do Hatim. Okay, let's do the motzi, yeah, hamotzi. All right.
Baruch
All right. So,
Thank you all for being here today.
Nelson, I can't hear you.
Thank you all for being here today. Thanks, Al. I don't need a microphone. Freedom is not free. We know there's two holidays that veterans particularly pay attention to. It's Veterans Day, where we recognize those that served. But this weekend, tomorrow, is Memorial Day. Memorial Day is when we recognize the over 1 million Americans that were killed in combat. That's over 1 million people since the founding of our great republic. We know that several million Jewish people have served since the founding of our great republic. I bet you don't know how many Jewish people have been killed since that time. Number is close to 100,000 Jews in combat. Just think about those families. Not 200 years ago, not just 100 years ago, not just 50 years ago, or even the Second World War 80 years ago, or just recently. Those families remember their departed. Again, not just the Jews, but everybody. I encourage you to take a moment of silence at 12 o'clock tomorrow when the flags are raised to full staff from half staff, and remember those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. I also encourage you to go to the Cherry Hill Municipal Building at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, where we have a ceremony that will be put on by the Jewish War veterans, the American Legion, and the township. If you haven't been there, it's a moving ceremony. Every year, for at least the last 20 years, we've been putting on this ceremony. Every year, we see children there that don't know much about the freedom that we have to fight for. With what's happening in Israel now, they're fighting for their freedom. Just keep in mind, if it wasn't for the United States and all those that gave the ultimate sacrifice, I don't think Israel would be there. Let's take a moment of silence now to remember those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. God bless them and their families. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Next.
I have several things to speak to you about. One of them is this paper. We don't remember things quite as well as we did when we were youngsters in our 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? So we prepared this paper of reminders for you. Take it home. If you take a look, it has our website on it. It also talks about that we are part of the International Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs, the Middle Atlantic region. It also talks about our monthly donations. If you look on the side here against the wall, that's where people would bring if they have the books. And it's a book swamp. You come in, you see if there's something you want. If you like it, take it, and leave a book. We also have it where books will go to Book Smiles. And sometimes they'll go to libraries, and they'll use it for a library sale. The other thing is Lions. Lions Club collects eyeglasses, and Rich Moskowitz. Rich, you here? Yeah. If you have a question, ask Rich Moskowitz. The other thing is food for the food pantry that so many of us work at. We have several teams that meet every other Wednesday and do work at the pantry. We have altogether, I would say probably at least 20 people who do different work at the pantry, delivering food, driving people, Jewish family service things. If you have ever done anything for the pantry, stand up, please, and be recognized. No matter what, stand up if you've done it. Thank you. The other thing is, up until the pandemic, we did a tremendous amount of purchases for the pantry. You'll notice on the paper, the envelopes where we paid for breakfast, there's a spot there if you wanted to make a financial donation to the pantry, right? And every once in a while, they have shortages. Right now, we help them out, and my trunk is full of toothpaste and detergent. Okay? And then what we do is, whichever team is going to be working at the pantry this week, we take the food and stuff that's been donated. So do bring, and we prefer kosher food. And lastly, the mitzvah cards. How many people have never heard of what we're talking about, mitzvah cards? Who don't know what I'm talking about, mitzvah cards? Oh, you do? Good. One person. If you need a card and you'd like it sent, it could be for congratulations, it could be condolences, it could be for anything. All right? You can get them either through our website, or we're going to start having them where people are here. And you just get it and send it off, and it's a special card that we had made up. All right, that takes care of this part. Take this, put it in your pocket, bring it home, and you'll remember, hopefully. Okay? A month from now is tough for us to remember almost anything, but if you have a paper, it helps. Second thing is, as you know, we've done quite a bit of contributions, actual items for the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. The biggest one we ever did was back in 2018, and we collected enough money to purchase up-to-date bulletproof vests. And Nelson Melitz and I were actually present when they were being distributed. So we know this organization is legit. Recently, we've done things like headlamps, tourniquets, shirts, and we found out that because of our contacts, it's not we just get what we think they need or from a long list. We'll call ahead and say, what do you need? And sometimes they'll say, we're packed right now, we got everything. What's the latest thing they need and why don't they need so much now? Is it's kind of like a lull between what they're doing in Gaza and what, God forbid, they have to do against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So what they did say, though, was that they could use, you know those multi-tools like Leatherman? Looks like a pair of pliers, you know? But they're the good ones. They don't want the cheap ones because they break, right? They're no good. Unfortunately, they're 40, 50 bucks or 60 bucks, and we said, we'll get you some. If you'd like to donate 1, 2, 3, or just cash, let Stan Schumas, our treasurer, know, or just give it to him, give him a check, whatever. There'll be more information. If you want to do it today, that's fine. It's nothing that we're sending now. We may send it in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Because it costs so much to ship things, we make arrangements with people going to Israel who take it and drop it off at the proper place. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, thanks. I think Ed's next. Ed Silver, right? Thank you.
I don't know if anybody who volunteers here really is looking for recognition, but all the food that's brought here every month doesn't come here by itself. We have people like Jay Sternos, Rich Moskowitz, Marty when he's here. They often serve us without even getting any recognition. So I'd like to just give them some thanks if you raise your hand or stand up. So Mike actually took some of my thunder, but just to dot an I, the food pantry isn't the only thing. By going there, we do a lot of work there, but we also ask people to bring food here every month. That table has only about 3 or 4 items. There are about 50 or 60 people here. Next month, I would like to see 50 cans of soup or 50 boxes of pasta. Bring some food here every month. Okay? Yes, sir.
So can people just go shopping at the markets right on Kings Highway and just take a bag right to the food pantry?
Mike can answer that better than I can.
Yes, yes, you can do that, but sometimes then you're getting things they don't need. But so still do it. Still do it. And you have to check that it's not out of date. And they have 2 separate things actually: kosher food for people who will take that, and non-kosher food. So if you have a choice, make sure it's kosher. And avoid glass if possible.
Bob?
One other thing, call ahead, make sure they're open.
Okay, so also, the books that we don't use, so you're invited to bring books here and take books home, but the books we don't use, how many of you are here when we had that speaker for Book Smiles? Yeah. Okay, so he uses those books to convert them into children's books, so I encourage you to bring your books. On your table, speaking of Book Smarts, there's a orange form. They're looking for volunteers to sort the books. They have a warehouse in Pennsauken, so I encourage you to consider volunteering. And lastly, we have a supply of blue squares. I don't see too many people wearing them. As you're aware, the Blue Square Project is to call attention to the rise in anti-Semitism, hate crimes against Jews. So we encourage people to wear them and even give them out to other people. I now have a high school kid that I know who's wearing it on his book bag. So I encourage you, they're going to be up front. Thank you. Abe, thanks.
Don?
Our picnic is June 9th at the Red Bank Battlefield Park. It's $10 per person. Money is due today. So if you haven't paid, Stan, I think, is over there on the left. Make sure you get your $10 to him for you and any guest you're bringing. There's a meeting immediately after this one of the picnic committee because we're going to figure out how much food we need. So if you're on the picnic committee, please stay for a few minutes after this meeting. One final announcement, we're gearing up for our next season of fantasy football. If you have any interest at all in fantasy football, you don't need any experience, you need to see me and let me know. And we'll try to hook you up with a team or help you create your own team.
If you want to, we can collect the money now, $10 a person, with, the family is invited, $10 a person. So let us know now, and this way we can know what.
And it's easy to get to. It's right off exit 23 of 295 South, 20 minutes from here.
Eddie, by the way, on Friday I sent out a notice, next notice, and it also has a link.
Yeah, it's,
Don, 11 o'clock, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. Unless you're bringing food, then you're gonna get there a little earlier. But we have the pavilion from 11 to 2. The park's open until dusk. And Dr. Janowski is going to be our guest speaker again, giving us an update on the dig for the Hessian soldiers that died there. And they're going to have an actual dig going on in the afternoon on June 9th. And we're allowed to participate if we want. So we can have like old relics digging for the other old relics.
Stan is here. Just give him the $10 or 20, 30, whatever. So how many people you have?
I'd like to point something out, guys. This is with spouses, and it's a cheap date. You took her out.
Hey, Doc, do you have to bring chairs or anything? Chaise lounges or anything?
I mean, if you, the pavilion seats 100.
On picnic benches.
But on picnic benches, you can certainly bring a beach chair. There's restrooms. It's a huge complex right on the Delaware. Look across the Delaware, you'll see Philadelphia International, ships going by.
Okay.
And I promise a nice day.
Ernie, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
If not, we're going to dent your car.
On your table is one of these packages. Harold Honickman, Sidney Kimmel and Harold Honickman are friends of mine and old customers. They built big buildings for the Jefferson Hospital, and so did my partner. And this is the most recent building. It's cost Harold Honickman $50 million, and it's a research center, a hospital, and so forth. I'm going to try to see if we can get tours to go through it, and I'm going to try to get speakers to come out here. And also, there's a bunch of car shows I'm running. I have one of my own in the bowling alley, and I have one for Willie Mission. And this is I'm doing the car show and the parade and so forth. And then I'm taking veterans from the VA hospital in Vineland to see Jay Leno. He's going to be there June 7th, and he's nice enough to let us have 2 busloads of veterans. And my last show, at the end of the year, September, is in Haddonfield, a big show. I'm going to have 180 cars. You're all welcome. If you need more people, I'll gladly pass them out. All yours.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. How many of you have gone to summer camp? Can you raise a hand? Summer camp? How many of you, keep your hands up, how many of you have been to the Catskills? Catskills. All right. Okay, so I have an opportunity for those that are interested. There's an organization, and Phil knows it, called Adama. They have a site in Maryland, which is called Pearlstone. They also have a facility in Weston, Connecticut, called Isabella Freedman. And they have retreats there, and you can look it up. But what I'm addressing right now is the concept of aging and saging, that as we get older, we really want to be amazing. And that is going to summer camp again. So Isabella Freedman, June 28th to July 10th, has a summer camp program. You can go as a single, you can go as a couple, you can bring other family members. It's an amazing experience. I've been doing it for 10 years. I recommend it. Anything that you do in summer camp, arts and crafts, swimming, volleyball, pickleball, yoga, Zumba, couples dancing, this happy hour every night, liquor, kosher food, they grow food, there's every kind of camp activity, painting, ceramics, movies at night, shows. We even have a talent show. So, Ira Eisenstein, anybody interested, please check in with me for Isabella Friedman Summer Camp.
How long is it?
It's a 10-day program, and it's in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is just near the border of New York. So it's very, very easy to get to. Okay? It's called Camp Isabella Friedman, if you want to look it up on the internet.
All right.
Thank you.
The next contact hour.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I want to introduce a returner to the group, Richard Lees. Richard belonged to the group many years ago, then took a little hiatus, and is now considering coming back. So please welcome him when he comes back, and with a round of applause right now. He has a talent that very few of us have. I don't have the talent. He knows how to listen. He is a very good listener. And when he also, in his prior years, he was a sign maker, correct? And, so he knows how to listen and share and a number of other things. So, meet him, greet him, welcome him. Thank you.
I wanted to say something. I wanted to say something before we get started with our speaker. I know a bunch of us here have done the flagging of the graves for Memorial Day in the past. I did it with my wife this year at Locustwood. I know in previous years I've been at Crescent a number of times. I've always said it's not well organized. We spend a lot of time looking for Jewish graves and making sure they're flagged properly and that they have the placards and so forth and so on. Sherry Jonas, who heads up the volunteers here at the JCC, came to me the other day and said, would some of your guys be willing to go out and help me map some of the cemeteries? And I said, let me see. I said, I will go help you with it because we can save a lot of time every Memorial Day walking around cemeteries trying to figure out where all the Jewish graves are without maps. She gave me 3 dates. They're all this week. Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Tuesday is in the morning, 9 to 10:30. Wednesday is 9 to 12. Thursday is 9 to 12. If you can help us, we are going to do Locustwood this week. Locustwood is probably the easiest of the ones to do. There's not that many Jewish graves at Locustwood. And what we want to do is we want to put some kind of map together in order so that when we go on Memorial Day, we can zip through there and get all the flags to the graves. So I will be here after the meeting. Please come up and see me if you can give us a couple hours. I don't even think it's going to take us a couple hours at Locustwood. And then after that, we'll talk about some of the other cemeteries. Our speaker today, I don't know what to say about her. She's got 1 million degrees. I know she has a JD from Georgetown.
Yes.
An MS from Johns Hopkins.
Yes.
A PhD from Geneva School of Diplomacy.
Yes.
And she's now working on
A Master's of Law in Global Health Law.
at Georgetown.
I'm back. I'm a double voyage.
She's going to speak to us about nanotechnology. I have no idea what that is, but I'm going to learn something today. Elise Feitshans.
Give her the mic to clip on.
Mic to clip on.
Yes, Mike. Thank you.
So you want to put that on your...
Where do you clip it?
Here's the clip.
Put it on a scarf. All right. Will it fall off? It's new. Can you guys hear me? Is it on?
No, it's for the camera. It's not for the...
It's not for the... It's for the camera.
Oh. I have to pretend I'm with my kids?
Yes.
Oh, my God. It is so cool to be here. This is the nicest Memorial Day I can remember since I was a little kid.
1 second.
Yes.
Could everyone turn off their cell phones so we're not embarrassed in front of our speaker?
This is so cool. what I was going to say is it's Memorial Day, and as Nelson knows, my dad was in D-Day. And when I was a little kid, he was the founder of the JWV Post in Riverdale, New York City. And he used to put me on the back of the convertible in the days before seat belts, and the disabled vets would get in the back of the convertible and I'd be on the top, and we'd go through the Memorial Day parade. And then Congress changed my birthday into a normal day and made Memorial Day the last Monday of the month, and my life has never been the same since. So this is the first time I've actually been close to my birthday, Memorial Day, and with people that care about it. This is one of the things I do is I'm the president-elect of the Virginia Mountain Valley Lawyers Alliance. We serve the legal desert in southern Virginia, south of Roanoke to North Carolina, and then west to West Virginia. It's a part of the Virginia State Bar, but it's a part, oh, thank you. It's a part that's very, very beautiful. And it's a legal desert because there is one law school that has 150 students, and we have fewer lawyers in our region than we have in the entire DC, District of Columbia, Virginia lawyers. So why that's important is, in my presidency, I'm going to talk about science and technology in daily legal practice and in daily life. And that means bringing to the legal desert a lot of information so the desert can bloom. And the book that I showed you at the beginning is also available in French for those of you that like French. My specialty, my doctorate, is the law of nanotechnology. I have the first one in the law of nanotechnology in Swiss. And today I'm going to just talk something relevant to daily life today. I'm going to talk about food for thought and nanoscale materials in food, and what does that mean for the future of kashrut. And I want to remind you when I talk that kosher is a verb, not a noun. That's extremely important. It's a process, and things must be kosher and follow the rules all along that process. And I'm going to tell you nanomaterials that I will explain what is nanotechnology, but nanomaterials are an important part of how we produce and package and store kosher food today, and also the other pieces of kosher that lots of people don't think about. Kosher clothing, for the people that care about mixing the different materials in their clothing. Kosher walking around, for the people that care about the line that goes around the Jewish district so you can have a stroller on Shabbat. All of those things are touched by nanotechnology. And I first gave this talk in Grenoble. There's an amazing synagogue that's funded by the Safra family, and also in Geneva, Switzerland, where I'm a member. And in both cases, the rabbis participated with me, so I'm going to try and bring some of their wisdom. Of course, they're rabbis, so there is a difference of opinion about the future of kosher in nanomaterials, and I think that's extremely important. I would love someday to have the opportunity to write a layperson book about this debate that could emerge about nanomaterials. So this is the synagogue in Geneva where I'm a member, where Rabbi Dayan, who is now in Salonika, but was originally Grand Rabbi of Salonika, then became Grand Rabbi of Geneva, now back in Salonika, where he actually participated in the Zoom meeting that we had with a synagogue in North Carolina and some people in Haddonfield on this topic. So, first of all, my bias. As a lawyer, I represent a point of view. I represent a way that things happen. My bias, my point of view. Nanotechnology has been called a revolution. And it was called that by the scientists, not by the other people. And that, I understand, revolution is a word, although very common in France, and maybe soon common on our college campuses. But in science, revolution is a very rarely used word. And the revolution of nanotechnology is that it's a new way of understanding the properties of materials, of matter. At the nanoscale, nanoparticles, we're all made of nanoparticles. Nanoparticle is just a unit of analysis. It is not some strange thing we invented in the 21st century. But they said in the late 20th century, before the US presidential commission that Bill Clinton commissioned, they said the way we look at matter with nanotechnology will revolutionize science because it unleashes properties that we didn't know about, and new ways of using old materials and new materials. So we have like 10 new elements on the periodic table of elements. And all of this is designed to influence commerce and our daily life. So nanotechnology's revolution, in my opinion, influences public health and influences Jewish daily life. So my goal here is just to raise a bunch of questions that are not answered and to start a discussion, a very important discussion about the future of kashrut and Jewish life. I will tell you a secret. We are at a crossroads. If we are proactively involved in this nanotechnology in food that I'm going to show you, it's very possible that you could have kosher food anywhere. 3D printing, they're printing in the space lab. 3D printing, you could have no limit on this verb of this process of being kosher. But if you stay out of the discourse, we could be shut out because things will be systematized and industrialized in a manner that we didn't think about before. So what is nanotechnology? Well, for me, first of all, what makes it so fascinating is that from the point of view of how we look at matter and life and policy and law, we're right here, I can't reach it, right in the middle of this Venn diagram. It's the coming together of public health, now called global health. The nuance of distinction is public health tends to be extremely local. Vaccine policies in Cherry Hill are not vaccine policies in Haddonfield. But global health, people need vaccines. How will they be distributed? What's the access to it? How do we know the quality of the vaccine? What's the price of the vaccine that controls distribution? That's global health. Public health is the brass tacks, the epidemiological questions, the biostatistical analysis that looks at how we have the ingredients of a policy. Emerging technologies, nanotechnology, and I want to point out, nanotechnology is a foundational technology. Everything is made of nanoparticles. We're all made of nanoparticles. This technology, this understanding of how to use and manipulate nanoparticles, this is the base for a lot of nano-enabled stuff. Artificial intelligence, 3D printing, which I'm going to talk about a lot. Stuff like that is nano-enabled. Without knowing what we know about manipulating the particles, we couldn't do what we're doing next. AI, you have massive amount of data. Not only could we not amass that data, we would not be able to store it and transmit it without what we know about nanotechnology. And of course, this is international law. I love this picture. That's the Swiss ambassador in the Palais des Nations, and I was very happy he let me take his picture. So we're talking about a confluence of these three seemingly unrelated areas. I'm going to give you just a little glimpse of what's nanotechnology and how some people would want to define it. And then think about it in terms of medicine, housing, and food. In medicine, we have hugely important bioethical questions about what we think of as a kosher world and a kosher life. And then there are questions the rabbis have been talking about, and then I want your questions. So first of all, one of the things that's been so exciting about nanotechnology is there has been a push from the start. From 1999, the major report launched in the Clinton era about the National Nanotechnology Initiative. There's been a push for stakeholder input, for having people care about how nanotechnology is used, what is it made of, etc. And so if you define the issue from the point of view of risk and impacts, first of all, there's a challenge. For the engineers here, it's a very narrow question, right? Does the nature of engineered nanostructured materials and devices present new safety and health risks? And the answer is we don't know. It depends on the context. It depends on which materials. It depends on how you're applying those materials. But the big policy question, the ones that rabbis can look at, the ones that legislatures look at, are how can the benefits of nanotechnology be realized while proactively minimizing the potential risk? And what this means is that lots of people are trying to define things. They want to make a list. Some people say don't make a list, just make criteria. How big is nanotechnology? What are you talking about, Ilise? Okay, this Nanomania is a toy that was available in Switzerland in 2011 and 12. It was about the size of a capsule. It'd probably be illegal in America because it was given out in a grocery store and it's smaller than a quarter. And in America, if it's smaller than a quarter, it's a risk of being swallowed by a child and can't be distributed freely without a bunch of disclaimers and stuff. Nanomania was the toy. It was traded on the web. And people were worried because Nanomania was so popular that people thought maybe this is going to define what is nanotechnology. It raises a very interesting question. Not only is it not a nano-enabled toy, but in fact it has nothing to do with the nanoscale. But the word nano is so cool and popular that it made an incredibly popular giveaway. Well, if you're a lawyer, if you're a legislature, if you're a rabbi worried about nano in food or in biomedical treatments or anything else, this is suddenly very important. Suddenly, the fact that this is actually billions and billions of nanos things doesn't really help you because this is what somebody thinks nanomaterials are. In truth, if you were to take just one strand of my hair, the diameter of one strand of my hair is 100,000 nanometers. So that's the size we're talking about. But if this is what the popular mind thinks is nano, then the regulators and the people making decisions have to worry about that. So this raised immediately a series of questions. And the question was, well, so what? How big a part of the economy is this anyway that we're talking about? At the time, in 2015, it was over $3 trillion of the US economy and predicted to be $14 trillion by 2022. I don't have the new number here, but it actually went up because the COVID vaccine is a nano-enabled technology using the mRNA devices and methods that were in fact related to using what we know about nanoparticles and using some nanomaterials that we can use to manipulate DNA. So the $14 trillion estimate is probably very small compared to what it is. And this is my favorite slide in the world, and now hopefully you'll know what is nanomaterials. The reason I know about nanotechnology is I was the coordinator of an encyclopedia of safety and health in the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And when I was the encyclopedia coordinator, we invited Dr. John Howard, who is still the director of the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health in the United States. We invited him to be our steering committee chair and give his advice. And Thanksgiving 2008, I will never forget this transformative time. Dr. John Howard came to Geneva and gave a lecture, Nanotechnology, the Newest Slice of Global Daily Life. And he gave a lecture explaining what nanotechnology would mean for the future, 2008. And he said to me after the lecture, as he handed me his slides, and this is one of them, he said, Ilise, if you care about health, if you care about the future of what's going on in health policy, you must study nanotechnology because it's the future. And I was very lucky. Not only was he an honest broker of data, but I believed him and studied it. This slide was from 2008. And he gave me this slide and said, Ilise, I apologize. This slide is outdated. And this slide, you will see it has pictures and digital imagery. It has coatings on paints and cars, tires, one of the first applications of carbon nanotubes. It's a remarkable change in how tires are made and how they last and what they do. Very relevant for our discussion of kosher, refrigerator linings. Everybody must have had some grandmother or grandparent that had some kind of silver in the household for the holidays and for important occasions. And why silver? Why not gold if you're rich? Why silver? The answer is, historically, we have always known silver has antibacterial qualities, antimicrobial qualities. So nanosilver in the lining of a refrigerator keeps everything safe and clean. And possibly controversial because it's in our refrigerator trucks when you buy bioorganic, specially non-GMO fresh foods, and yet you're being exposed to nanosilver. Nanosilver in clothing, just a few years after this slide, was an extensive litigation in California about the quantity and the duration and whether it stays, the so-called biopersistence of nanomaterials. And you can see all the legal issues popping out like fireworks here. And of course, pharmaceuticals. What's really cool about pharmaceuticals is it raises a very important ethical question. Too many people have asked me, is nanotechnology dangerous? Are nanomaterials dangerous? And my answer is always, what do you want to use them for? Because we love it when those nanomaterials get in there and destroy cancer cells. It's really revolutionized cancer therapy in the last 10, 15 years. No question. But that means there's some very toxic stuff. If you can kill a cancer cell, if you can target that material so just a teeny little quantity gets in there and kills a cancer cell, that's a toxic material. So the question isn't, is it dangerous? It's, do you like the danger that it brings? Do you like how that danger is being used? And early on when I started doing this, the questions came up across governments. I'm not going to read you these slides, but these are quotes from different governments talking about the potential risks and dangers. And this is our own NanoGov webpage talking about how we're going to make skin. This is an old slide. This is a 10-year-old slide about how we're going to make skin using nanomaterials and regenerative. So for COVID-19, tons of applications in the medical area because mRNA is enabled because of nano-enabled knowledge. So the OU has not, to my knowledge, yet really come out with any kind of statement about this, but there has to be some question around what is this doing in our food and how does our food really manage when we have all these wonderful, beautiful new changes. So first of all, there's industrial kosher food. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. The image of grandma in the kitchen, my grandma was there rolling the phyllo dough and stuffing it with cheese and spinach, and it's an image. It's very, very few people. You want to buy tiropita, you go to the store and you can have kosher or non-kosher and you put it in the microwave and now you've had a traditional meal. But the days where this is really a homebound industry has really changed. Much of the time that you eat at home, you eat ready prepared food anyway. Something like a third of the food that we eat at home, not counting the pizzas, is already prepared elsewhere. This is very important for that crossroads I mentioned. Are we looking at a process where we're going to proactively control the role of kosher food, or are we going to let circumstances overtake us so that it becomes really, really difficult? And so if only part of the meal is prepared at home, the role of this industrial side, the role of the rabbinical opinions, the role of the popular demand for this becomes more important. So first of all, nano is in kosher food because the entire process, the European Food Safety Authority has a process called field to fork. And in the field to fork process, if you make a timeline, every step of the way, there is a nano-enabled question, starting with how you make the pesticides that protect the food. There are some people growing pesticides. You can put nanoscale copper into plants that makes them resistant to some problems. I'm not smart enough to tell you what. There are nanopesticides that come from using existing pesticides, but back to that cancer problem, much more potent, much less pesticide used. So on the good news, you eliminate a huge question of hazardous waste and suiting up with all that big equipment, plastic all around you so that it's safe to cover a whole field, and the field may or may not be good for a while. You have to wait. Can use a significantly smaller quantity of pesticide in order to make that field safe. But obviously, a much more toxic, much more potent pesticide. I mentioned already refrigerator linings, because it's silver. That may raise some other questions. And the EFSA is really intense on this. Packaging and transport. They have something they call contact transmission analysis. So if you put a food on this paper tablecloth and it has a carbon nanotube coating, invisible because it's at the nanoscale, but it's there, and that carbon nanotube migrates into the food, are you now having a plastics problem, or maybe some problem for the kashrut of the rest of the process? Because it's there. Contact analysis. So, and then of course there are new foods, and some of them in really cool places. Here's the field to fork idea. Basically, at every one of these photographs, there is something that is somehow nano-enabled. Whether it's the coating on the plates, whether it's the way we package the food, and the carbon nanotubes we use to do that. We can store food longer. We can ship it with less expense, less insurance cost, because it's more likely to get there safely, and it's lighter, and it may even be fresher than if you did the same thing 10 years ago. So, I mean, look at it. I've gone to the store, I've seen oatmeal with expiration dates years after the date of purchase. This is really a revolution, just like they said. And even the forks themselves, if you buy a new fork, is going to have some coating. This is the EFSA flow chart for a decisional analysis. How do you know something is nano and therefore covered by their laws? We don't have parallel laws to this in the United States, and I have written about this at Georgetown Law in the Global Health Law program, because this is actually quite a problem. Even if you take for granted that EFSA caring about it is enough for the whole wide world, it's nonetheless a problem from the point of view of trade, that the US does not have parallel laws to what's going on abroad. So first of all, how do you know a food is in this nano construct that EFSA worries about? And then once you know, what do you do about it? And of course, I said new foods. There's an Israeli company, Aleph Farms meat growers. And here's one of the first ethical questions the rabbis had to look at for me. The question is, they're growing food in the space lab. Now, as a lawyer, I love this, because are they covered by the Moon Treaty? Are they covered by the law of the flag of the space lab in the part they're in? Parts of the space lab are American, part are Chinese, part are Indian, part are Russian, part are confluence of a bunch of countries that have small space programs like Japan and Switzerland. You guys didn't even know, right, that there's astronauts in Switzerland. It doesn't make sense, right? What do they need it for? Well, they don't have an ocean. They need the air. Okay, so is it the Moon Treaty? Is it the flag of the country in that part of the space lab? Is there some special agreement governing the space lab that deals with commercial enterprises that might be touched by this? And at the end of the day, the question is, well, what are they doing? What they're doing is they're extracting cells from live animals, and they're using those cells and growing them in the space lab to make steaks. And they're saying in their ads, that these are vegan steaks because no animal was harmed or destroyed? Well, this is a really interesting question for kashrut, because that means the animal wasn't slaughtered. That means the animal isn't dead. And there are rules about that. So are you vegan? Are you meat? Are you something else? These are questions. I don't have answers. And I'm very near out of my time, so I will tell you that this question keeps me up at night. I find this fascinating, because this is possibly a future of how many foods will be generated. And you wouldn't even know if you don't have the kind of vigilant regulatory mechanism that the European Food Safety Authority has put in place. You wouldn't have a way to look at a meat in a store and say, well, this was really grown in a lab. And by the way, they're growing it in a lab using 3D printing, which is another nano-enabled ability. So 3D printing basically lets you copy stuff. If you have the recipe technically of the chemistry of something, and you have those chemicals, you download that recipe from wherever it came from, raising lots of very interesting patent and copyright law questions, and that's where the bulk of the legal work is right now. But I think that's mistaken, because once it's downloaded, you don't know where it necessarily came from, and you print it right where you are. The problem the FDA had when they were doing this with medical devices during COVID-19 was you could have a licensed copy of the use of the 3D printing, but if a dentist like Ira wants to 3D print some teeth to implant, who's gonna know? Where's your oversight? Where's your copyright and patent protection? And where's your ability to confirm that it met whatever standards for medical devices that the FDA spent its time doing? Our FDA just says, don't worry about it, we don't have rules yet. We participated in an international consortium. But in fact, there are plenty of questions raised just by this really great idea of vegan steaks, 3D printed in outer space. So those were the kinds of questions we put to the rabbi. And they said that, first of all, respect for human rights as rooted in our Judaic heritage and kosher traditions is paramount. So Rabbi Dayan said, it's not the question of whether it's kosher or not. It's the question of whether it's poison or not, because you cannot poison the human system. And so you could go through the kosher process and produce something that is hurtful to that individual, and that would violate the rules of kashrut anyway. And also, respect for human life above all, fix the brokenness of our world in Tikkun Olam. We have the ability to feed the entire world now because of nanotechnology. It's dumb to say this in America, because in America we waste 40% of our food. It's documented all over the place. The food waste in America is so horrible that I have personally taken on freezing stuff and giving food away, because 40% of what we've prepared is thrown away, and yet there are starving people. But in fact, if you had a view of kosher that really views it as a mission to feed people properly, we could do this now thanks to nanotechnology. First of all, our production is up. Second of all, we have sources of production, as I just showed you, that didn't exist before. Third of all, we actually use less material to produce the stuff, less pesticide. When we finally harvest it, we have nanosensors on the John Deere tractor, and it can tell you which grain to harvest and which grain to leave there for a week, and then come back in a week and go get the other grain. This is unbelievable. We have an ability to have so much less waste, but we are wasting. So this is a really huge ethical question. We can feed the world now, and we have to think about, do we want to do that? Can we do that? Is that part of our mission in being kosher? And I will tell you also that I would love to talk another time about biomedicine, because that is what I'm going to talk about in Greece, July 7th July 5th. And the question there is, we're on the threshold of infinite life. If you go to the National Institutes of Health website, paid for by the tax dollars of everyone in this room, and look at the commons where they're talking about how to create replacement organs, because replacement organs are biocompatible with the person and at the same time cut out all these horrible things around human trafficking and matching donors and all. You can just take a swap of somebody's skin, I don't know if it's 5 inches or 6 inches, something like that, and reproduce the cells just like the steaks in outer space. And it's biocompatible and it's less. So NIH has, you double click for heart, double click for pancreas, double click for liver. You could actually make an entire whole new human. We're on the threshold of infinite life. What does that mean in this context of our kosher future? And will the UN have anything to say about this? I don't know. What does it mean to be able to live in a completely kosher world? We are definitely on the threshold of being able to make that happen. And what's our responsibility to make that happen? Because this is a very exciting time, and these changes are very cool and very hard won, but we don't yet know how we're going to apply it. Is it dangerous? Depends on what you use it for. We love it when it kills cancer. We love it when it kills the bugs that destroy our foods. We love it when it makes a smarter, sharper weapon that you can knock out a missile before it lands. That doesn't mean it's safe and healthy and pretty if it's in your kitchen table. On the other hand, we can feed the world. We can create new organs for people. We're on the threshold of a breakthrough in Parkinson's that's going to make it possible to have people with Parkinson's return to productive society. Michael J. Fox Foundation, thanks to the Safra family, has an enormous push going on. It's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's my conclusion. My conclusion is a bunch of questions. And I want to hear from you, and I want to engage in this conversation across a long period of time, because these are not easy answers. But I hope that this has given you a taste of what kosher nanotechnology could look like, and that hopefully you'll want to hear more and think about it. That's all I have to say. Question? I hope you guys have questions. Ira, you're the only question? Wait. Question over there.
Hi. Has any part of your research involved manufacturers of food and the expiration dates, the best by use?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked.
Whether or not they're inaccurate or how inaccurate they are, and making recommendations.
When I was the director of the European Scientific Institute, the question was, has there been questions around expiration of food and expiration dates and use dates? Yes. So the very first year I was the director of the European Scientific Institute program on law and guidance for nanotechnology. We had teams making all these little enterprise projects with students from a whole bunch of different disciplines. And one guy came up with a nanosensor that can show, and this does exist in real time now, a nanosensor that can show whether food is ready or not. If it's meat, it can show the food is turning, okay? Very interesting problem, legally. Why? What do you do with it? Okay? You've got it on the shipment, it turns from yellow to green, it's okay. Then suddenly it turns red. And now you can't use it. What do you do with it? When you're doing the legal analysis, the tort, whose fault is it? The contract analysis, who absorbs the cost of that lost food? Is there some secondary market that you can either require or allow it to go to? So the problem wasn't that we can know the expiration. We can know the expiration. The problem is we didn't know what to do with that information. We don't know if we want that information. By contrast, the same technology in a different morph was used in COVID-19 vaccines. I don't know if you remember, but there was a discussion about vaccines that had been exposed to the wrong temperature and therefore were no good. You remember that, right? I'm not making it up. How do we know that? Nanosensors on the exterior of the packaging were able to tell what the exterior temperature was. So we have the technology. It's a classic, that's why I jumped in the air. It's a classic question of what do we want to do with that information. That's a policy question. You don't have to know a lot of nanotechnology, and you don't have to know a lot of law, but it affects your daily life, and it's an important policy question. Did I answer your question?
So, like a food pantry, would there be someday available some device that would, they say, be able to look at, say, cans of corn or fruit or whatever, and say, hey, the manufacturer's expiration date is wrong. It's really going to last until X instead of what there's.
Yeah, there is. But you see, the problem in the United States is FDA is not commenting on nanotechnology in food. That's what I wrote about. If you go to the EFSA, okay, they have a whole stepwise analysis. And I always tell clients, stepwise means step carefully. It's self-reported. The beauty of it that they use to market the stepwise analysis is you don't have to disclose anything to anybody because you make your own answer. But if you lie to yourself and say it's okay and then it isn't, it's completely on you. It makes up for the fact that there isn't enough staff in the world to inspect everything all the time. We don't have this. But in Europe, the answer is yes. In America, the answer is no, unless you want to lobby for it. But in Europe, the answer is yes. They have that. Yes. You had a question?
Yeah, the question, you didn't talk about the downside. I understand they're finding nanoparticles in blood, in cells, in animals.
You mean different nanoparticles, migrated nanoparticles, because blood is made of nanoparticles. We're made of nanoparticles.
External particles
Right.
that are
Yes.
that are foreign.
Well, okay, so the question is, what's the downside here? And I want to emphasize, as I said in the beginning, it's a contextual question. We like it when the nanoparticle in your blood that we injected or made available is going to kill a cancer cell, right? So the question is, what else is it doing there? Did it leave or did it stay? Those are things that we have to research.
Yeah, is it a pesticide?
Is it a pesticide? Nanoplastics? I would love to talk to you about what's going on in Europe with nanoplastics. There's a whole regulatory regime. And in fact, nanoplastics is a very big deal, but in the States it's like this, nanoplastics, what is that? So yes, but it's a contextual question. And just to make it more relevant to kashrut and Jewish law, it has a great deal to do with that person. If somebody has 6 months or a year left in their life, do we care about it ethically the same way as if they have 20 or 60 years left in their life? Because sometimes it might improve their quality of life in that final phase, in which case we might actually want it. And those are ethical questions. Those are not questions that have a straightforward answer that's going to be the same for everybody. But that's what our Talmud is for. So those are very important questions for rabbis and for discourse by this group. Yes, sir?
So a lot of the nanotechnology that's currently in use is used by sensors to pick up information. And we're eating it, we're wearing it, we're swallowing pills full of it. And what should libertarians be thinking about with the application? Is Starlink able to read our whereabouts or the cameras of every city street?
You mean from a political standpoint of privacy?
Well, yeah, personal independence, individuality, and privacy, because apparently if the cameras on every city sidewalk, bank, and wherever you go are set to the right wavelength, they can hear us, see us, and
So if I understand the question, I'm going to repeat it in case people didn't hear it. It's really what should a libertarian care about in this era when all
It
this...
sounds like personal privacy is evaporating with the use of nanotechnology.
Well, I think that's a very important area for a lot of discourse. There are several institutes, for example, at Georgetown Law, looking at privacy and technology. And I have two views of it. One of it is that, yes, this is extremely important. In a way, we have lost a great deal of individual privacy. The Europeans have an answer to this. The Europeans have created the GDPR, which at first they laughed. They said, oh, it was made to sound like they were going to tame Google and it didn't do anything. But now they're suing Google under the GDPR. Thank you. And so the thing is that in Europe there is a regime that, for better or for worse, tries to deal with some of these issues. And I love talking about GDPR, but in the law school in America they don't want to hear about it. They want to have a lot of academic questions and things like that, but they don't want to hear about hard and fast rules about what you can and cannot do with data. For example, the right to be forgotten under the GDPR. That you can actually opt out of these huge data sets. They have to show you they took you out, they have to track it, and they have to assure you that you're not back in it somehow. And then if you find yourself in there, you actually have redress. And because it's so individual, it's what we call a self-executing law. So many people have a personal interest in it that people are very careful about it. And then there are big fines for bad actors. Marriott Hotels had a hacking, and Google gave away data, and people with big guns come after them. So the first answer is, if we wanted in the United States, we could have a legal regime around it. My personal opinion about this is going to surprise you, though. I think this is sort of a distraction from some other big problem. I haven't decided quite yet which big problem. And the reason I say this is, in 1995, I took my children to China for the UN Conference on Women. And I had a fax that came to me from Joe Murphy of Haddonfield. And the fax came to me 3 days after it was sent. And I said to the staff, why did it take you 3 days to give me my fax in a hotel in the middle of Beijing, where everybody speaks Chinese? And they said, well, we had to translate it. I said, but it was marked confidential. And they said, that's why we had to translate it. Okay, the question isn't what happened to that fax that afternoon. It was too unimportant. The question is, look at your watch. It's almost 30 years later. Is some government person paid to archive that and find it for me if they need it? And what did the government do with that information? So in an ambient sense, the question isn't that it's nanotechnology made this possible. We have been on a trajectory of collecting information about people since Brandeis complained about it in 1890 in the most famous Harvard Law Review article called The Right to Privacy, which is cited by the dissent in America. Okay? The question is, what are we doing with this data? Are we using it to hurt people so that they can viciously go after one another? Or are we using it for some greater good? And I think that's the question. But I do think the question of the government collecting everything is sort of a distraction, because that is what governments do. And they've been doing it the whole 20th century. Am I making any sense to you?
Oh, sure.
I hope we have a big discussion about it.
Do you think know any good actors in our government?
John Howard. I absolutely believe in everything John Howard has done. He transformed my life. He transformed my understanding of nanotechnology. And I think he's been called a national treasure by the Washington Post. I'm honored to know him. I can't even believe he answers my emails. Yes, there are good people in government. Otherwise, we'd be in worse state.
One more question.
Well, we got three. Ira had one also. Okay.
Because otherwise we start falling asleep.
Oh, I don't want you to fall asleep.
I'd like to ask a question about, you talked about skin and nanotechnology, and somebody has cancer. Where is the application there? I mean, my wife happens to have right now, she's going in for treatment for cancer on her nose, and it'll be in a few months. what practical, is there a practical?
The whole field of translational medicine is nano-enabled. If you're at Penn, I spoke at the translational medicine crowd. If you're in Penn and you're there, everything they're doing is nano-enabled, just like the mRNA is. Remember, it's about understanding how particles behave. It's not about a more precise use. It's about understanding how particles behave. One of the earliest uses in the slide from John. Why is this not going back? Froze. That means they want to get rid of me. One of the earliest uses is the targeted drug delivery, as it's called. If you imagine that an aspirin is like 90% stuff to protect the stuff that makes the aspirin work, and you strip that away, and you just take that active agent and maybe one or two things to guide it or do something with it that I'm not smart enough to tell you, then you just shoot that directly at your problem. So targeted drug delivery in killing cancer tumors by going into the cell, because the nanoparticles can traverse the cell membrane, that's really key. That's been the revolution in the 21st century. More specific than that, we don't want to take everybody's time, I certainly can tell you. But that breakthrough idea that you can have this really precise targeting of this very toxic material that does stay in the body and migrate, and we worry about it in the blood, but you make a trade-off. That's why I want it to be discussed in the context of kosher and rabbis and stuff, and what people think about it in daily life, because you make a trade-off. You say this cancer is really going to kill this person. They really are convinced of that. So what are we doing in exchange to reduce that, to mitigate it, to make it less severe and last longer and all that? Those are changes that are trade-offs. They're ethical questions, and there's no straightforward right answer.
Thank you. Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for participating. You technically have a year's subscription to our club.
Wow. Can I give it to my husband?
Yes, yes. No, do that.
I will. I'll make my husband
Okay,
do
take a picture.
Yes.
Take a picture.
Thank you. With you guys? Yes. Thank you.
Get closer to 8.
Okay. Oh, this is so cool. You even spelled my name right. Wow.
Okay.
The mic to the podium.
50-50.
Okay.
We have two winners today. We have the money winner and someone donated from the food pantry, which they're not allowed to give out, a bottle of wine. So the first one will be the money and the second one will be the bottle of wine. All right, last three digits. 360, last three digits. 360. Yes? We have two winners? 360, one over there and one over there. Can somebody decide who has the 360?
Give the fourth one.
Well, I'll read the whole. Bob, yes, no? Bob can't see. Could somebody help him out? No? 360? Come on up.
Thank you.
The whole number is 264.
We'll get up. I don't remember. You know, every Sunday we have a breakfast.
360. How much is the...
$59.
$59. All right, and now...
Okay. Gary's donating.
And now for the bottle of wine. Don't give this back. Go home and drink it.
The bag is over there. You have it.
Oh, what happened to our bag of tickets?
That's what we do every day.
Here, I'm gonna pick one. You pick it. Yeah, I'm gonna pick this one. 161. 161.
Check your tickets.
Last three. No, I don't have. Oh no. 160. Now he's got it. Ah, come on. Everyone waiting, but they weren't. Are you serious? No, I want to see you take it. I want to see it.
Could be.
Okay.